I'm going to ask some questions about your new work and also about some of your older work and your writing process, but I have to ask at the start, before we get started, what you felt when you found out that Professor Levinson had you as number 3 on his list. Let's see.
Well, number 3. You mean you said number 1?
Yeah.
I was shocked to be on the list. I was shocked by the whole thing. I mean, I was like every girl, certainly every girl who was majoring in English literature was so imbued with the romance of literature and all the standard romantic notions of people meant for each other, flying magnetically across planetary distances to find each other, right? I wasn't intensely romantic. I was the only kid on the block who was always saying to every other kid on the block, you know when you fall in love. If you don't know, it's not love. I was like 12 years old and I was saying this. So,
very assured.
The realization that he had a list and the whole thing horrified me. No, I was not happy to be on that list.
Just the existence of a list at all was horrifying enough. Right. So the existence of a list at all was horrifying enough.
Yeah.
So I just want to share something briefly. I said this to Jason a few days ago, or last week when it happened, actually. I've covered it quite well with makeup, but about a week ago I had quite a difficult spill that put 5 stitches into my chin.
Oh, really? Can't see it.
Thank you. Right. Makeup's come a long way. So when I fell, I was holding this book. No. I'm just saying you were with me in this story, and it was, there's a lot that I thought about after this happened, and I started trying to write about it. And Jason said, that is a horror. Jason, who introduced us, was he said that's a horrible. That's quite an anecdote, but it's a horrible situation. And I said to him, you might even say, there's the situation.
What's the story?
And then there's the story. So, yes. So, but bing. All right. So, situation and the story. I mentioned that this was how I was introduced to your work. And you say in the situation and the story, let me see if I can. You mentioned that you can't teach. All right, let me see. I'm going to find it. You can't teach writing to. It's in the conclusion. Okay. Maybe me and my bookmarks. Okay. Here we go. I got it. Yeah. You cannot teach people how to write. The gift of dramatic expressiveness, of a natural sense of structure, of making language sink down beneath the surface of description, all that is inborn cannot be taught. But you can teach people how to read, how to develop judgment about a piece of writing, their own as well as that of others. But I want to ask you, these inborn gifts of dramatic expressiveness, of a natural sense of structure, of making language sink down beneath the surface of description, these are all gifts that you have.
Good.
Yeah, good. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how that possibly was fostered in certain ways by the way you were brought up, by your experiences at City College, this sense of structure, this gift of dramatic expressiveness. Were you born with that, or did that get helped along with the people who were around you in your life?
Well, sure. Yes to both. I was born with. I meant what I said there. I don't believe you can teach writing, and for the reasons that I've stated. But everyone who becomes a writer has to be a real reader. And the important thing is to learn to read your own work, right? And that is what the programs can do for you. And in my own case, when I was a kid, when I was at City, there were no writing programs. There were, however, 2 guys who were teaching. They were both World War II novelists. One was a tough guy, and one was a gentle soul. And we, those of us who were interested in writing, reading and writing. Most people did not think of themselves as writers. It was something you discovered in an awestruck way. If something, for instance, is one of these guys said, he held up a piece I wrote and he said to the class, "This girl's a writer," and I was shocked and fantastically thrilled, very thrilled. So what I learned in his class and in the other one, we took them both, took as much as you could. I was learning how to read. I was learning how to consider what writing meant, and that was all we had. When I was graduating, I went to see him. His name was Erwin Stark, and he was a novelist. He had a number of novels published, and Harold knows Stark's name. So I go to see Stark, and I'm standing in front of his desk, and he looks up and he says, "Yeah?" I mean, he was a tough guy. And I said, "You said I was a writer." And he said, Yeah, kid, yeah. So I said, what should I do now? He said, "Write." So I said, "Write about what?" He said, "Get out of here, kid." And that was my instruction for the rest of my life. That was it, and it was enough. Yeah. I mean, there are no answers. These are these questions that people ask all the time. How do you do this, or why do you do that? You all know there are no answers to these things. There's certainly no prescriptive answers for these things.
No, but people keep asking because they wish that there were.
No, they wish yeah. I know the MFA programs foster more fairy tale, more wishful thinking than you can shake a stick at.
There's a lot of MFA students in the audience tonight.
I'm not telling you anything you don't know, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering because, the importance of reading in your writing practice is not asking for answers for anyone else, but just curious about your own practice over the years, how you balance your writing time with your reading time, and has that changed over the years? Like, does it depend on if you're working on a book project? Do you go through periods of not writing at all?
Oh, not periods, no. But no, it's always been the same, misery. It's just miserable. It's a miserable life. It's boring, it's lonely, it's poor, it's...
Who invited her here?
Yeah. No, I've always done it the same. In fact, though, since the pandemic, I read more than I ever did. I got into the habit since we weren't doing anything, going anywhere, and it was such a strange time, especially in the beginning. I fell into the habit of lying down on the bed, not in bed, but on the bed, every afternoon at 4:00 and just reading for 3 hours, and I've kept that up. Now, I've always done it pretty much the same. The one thing is I sit down at that desk at 9:00 every morning. That has never varied. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here.
That's what we often hear in class is called the ass in chair.
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned, how things changed a lot during pandemic lockdown, and I know that you've always been a big walker, and
Yes.
walking is very important to you. And I was curious because, thinking about, we can talk a lot about different aspects of walking in the city, but the importance of a writer of memoir, a writer of personal essay, having a point of view when they're writing a piece. And I think about all the inspiration that you've got on walks and observing and noticing. I wonder if you've seen over the years, I see so many people like this on their phones now when they're walking around. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that perhaps limiting young writers' chance to form their point of view if they're buried in a phone, or is this just a personal gripe that I have?
Well, I don't think if you are a young writer that you are necessarily one of those people. That I don't know. Well, you mean people do a lot more of that and a lot less reading?
Or even walking around, or even being on the subway. New York City
Yeah.
is such a rich
Yeah.
environment for observing
Yeah.
human behavior.
Yeah.
And I feel like people are missing out on that because of these devices.
True. I'm very aware of the fact that nobody's reading on the just very, very few. And that people are, the number of people, I sort of count them every single time I'm on the subway. The number of people looking at the phone and not reading. And I'm always very overly curious to see what people are reading when they are reading. Yes, the world has changed fantastically, and it certainly can't be good for literacy or for. I have no idea how many potential writers this world of technology has discouraged, or that would be more for the rest of you to discover. But yeah. I mean, what I find most horrifying is you walk into a restaurant and you see couples sitting and nobody's talking. We've all been in this for a very long time now, and there's nothing we can say that's new or fresh. It's a world we're all habituated to. And only history will let us know what the terrible influences have reaped. What the feeling of an increasingly less literate culture is very strong. I have no words of wisdom about it.
Yeah, but it is a good point to think, I also like seeing what people are reading, and sometimes people are reading on devices, and they're robbing us of the ability to know what they're reading also.
It's true, too.
Not fair at all. So I would just ask, I'm going to read something from that you wrote about this book on Elizabeth Cady Stanton. You said that you wrote this book about the great 19th century suffragist Elizabeth Cady Stanton. I did that because I'd become embroiled in an argument over whether the women's movement could produce literature as well as testimony. And I'd gone looking for the poetry in the movement, in Elizabeth Stanton. I found it. And I read that and I thought to myself, what in that moment or in any moment prompts you then to say, I'm going to dedicate a full book to this and not a single essay, for example?
I loved her. I really loved her, and I felt she deserved. It's just a small book. It's like one of those introductions to the masters, that kind of thing. It's
right
small. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, she was our only great. I compare her to Simone de Beauvoir, Mary Wollstonecraft. She's at that level, but she did not produce a single work as the others did to mark her career, to mark her. But for 50 years, she sent a petition to Congress every single year for 50 years. And every year she found a new way of framing the question of why she was where she was, why, and every one of them, you couldn't believe that petition writing could be poetic, but it is. There's her feelings of outrage and sadness and a million other things just deepened every single year. It all stayed alive for her for all those years. And so, that's why I did it. Yeah, she is very poetic for me.
Yeah. It's beautifully written, and like you really put yourself into that too. It's not just straight biography.
Yes, a little bit. Yeah. That's a problem, by the way. I do insert myself as there seemed a moment when it felt right for me to describe myself as a second-wave feminist, rediscovering in history ourselves. I mean, that I found she said everything that I was saying and that everybody else was saying. And she said it as we were saying it. And I was so shocked and amazed. It felt right. But this is a habit that has grown, and which is very iffy, I just read a biography of another 19th century great in which the writer inserts herself way too much. And you know what I mean? I'm sure you've all read those things. And I was reading this and feeling a distaste for what I was reading and thinking, well, how much is just the right amount, and how much is too much, and why am I feeling this, and am I justified in feeling this? It's a very iffy business, I think. The habit of wanting to insert ourselves, to speak with reference to ourselves very directly, and no matter what we are involved in intellectually. So I just throw that out.
Okay, yeah. We've enjoyed reading about you inserting yourself into your work so much.
Well, I don't insert myself. I am the thing.
You are the thing, right. So there's that difference there.
What I mean by that is the reason I discovered I was a nonfiction writer was that I discovered I grew up like everybody else expecting to write the great American novel, right? I discovered that it was only when I used myself as an unsurrogated instrument of the storytelling, that it was only when I was able to use myself to tell the story that I had a story to tell. That, you know what I mean? When I tried to write as a fiction writer, it just lay there like a dead dog. I couldn't bring it to life. I couldn't get somebody in the room, out of the room. I didn't know what to do. But when I just used myself directly, I found that I had storytelling gifts. That's when you learn you're a nonfiction writer. See, what I call the surrogated self and the unsurrogated self. The novelist and the poet are using surrogates. Well, not the poet, yeah. But the novelist uses surrogates. The nonfiction writer does not. Yeah. So,
yeah.
I have to defend that position.
No, absolutely. I can't write fiction. I have great respect for fiction writers. I don't know how they do it.
Right.
I'm going to, also in the situation in the story, you did mention 30 years ago, people who thought they had a story to tell sat down to write a novel. Today they sit down to write a memoir. So it's like this thing that's been happening, and I'm curious now still why you think memoir remains such a powerful and well-loved form. I mean, even as a nonfiction student, I don't know if I'm the only person who's heard this, even memoir specifically, if you're even working on a collection of essays, an editor will try to say, can you turn that into a memoir?
Yeah, well, it's the genre of the hour. That's why they say that, not because they have any real understanding of why you should turn anything into a memoir,
right,
or not. Well, yes, it is the genre of the moment. It's a long story why novel writing, fiction, feels, culturally speaking, as if it might have run its course. It's a long literary story. You can all go look it up. It's the death of modernism. From the end of the Second World War on, it became a culture of testimony, for one thing. Nothing after the war, after the Second World War, nothing seemed as powerful as the testimony that grew out of that war. And out of that also came the liberationist movements of the 70s, just a mere 30 years later, 25 years later, when people began to speak unstoppably out of their own experience. But it was testimony. To turn that into literature is another matter. But it was out of that impulse that began, so that for many people, novel writing didn't feel as powerful as testament, which was not literature. But then quite a large number of people turned out to be writers in that genre, and the rest is history. But that is so. There's a lot of memoir writing, but there's not a huge amount of literature that comes out of it, right? It's a complicated business, but it's been essentially a century of testament. Millions of people who never thought they had the right to open their mouths and say "I" in public learned to do exactly that, and out of that comes literature, but that itself is not literature. So anyway,
Yeah.
we can go on about that.
Sure. I mean, out of that also might come possibly some social change, right? If not literature, there you've more testimony or.
Yes, that's certainly true.
Yeah.
That's certainly true.
Yeah. I'm going to deep dive here. You wrote in the Village. Vivian also wrote for The Voice in the 70s, and
Yeah.
you wrote in an essay about the New York City subway in 1972. You said you did. You said you took your place among the working class strap hangers at age 17, but with a vital difference.
Oh, I don't remember that.
I'm reminding you. I was now a college student, already in that process of cultural absorption that would leave me with a kind of double vision for the rest of my life.
Where the hell did I write
You
that?
wrote that in a 1972 Village Voice essay.
Really?
You did.
Oh my God! How did you find that?
I Googled it.
Oh my God! I'm shocked.
So to surprise you with that, I wonder if you resonate with that, because I'm curious how that double vision might be coming into play in the book you're writing now, if that still resonates.
Well, yeah. What I mean there is, when I was a kid, I'd get on the subway with my mother and my infamous Aunt Minnie. They were like characters in Balzac, my mother and her sister. They couldn't live with each other, they couldn't live without each other. So they fought all the time, but they couldn't bear to be apart from each other. And on the subway, it was their habit to sit across from each other and talk in Yiddish. So now I get on the subway and I hear people in every language imaginable talking at the tops of their voices all over the subway and doing the same thing. Whoever they are, one is sitting here and two are sitting across the way, and I find myself getting irritated, and then I remember where I came from. I remember Minnie and my mother, and that was the double vision, no doubt. But when I wrote that in 1972, I was a lot closer to being a self-conscious college student.
That's right. At
And I
some
was
decades.
amazed, but I still experience that on the subway.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, when you were reading from the selection from the book you're working on, and you talked about City College, which is like the birth of the City University of New York system, this impressive alumni that have come out of City College, out of CUNY system, the fights over support for public higher education, and it was tuition free, and we're having debates about that now with CUNY. And
Yeah, exactly.
and so I wonder if you think about the timing of writing this book and its possible introduction into not at all.
I don't think so.
No?
But yes, it goes on and on and on. That was one of the things that when I started to do a little bit of research, I was shocked to see the sameness of the arguments for and against public higher, tuition-free higher education, which there is none of anymore. It's an ongoing struggle. That's all. And for this, what I read you and however far I've gotten with this, I'm still groping. I really don't know what my point of view is, or exactly where I'm going with this. I only know that my memory is so powerful of the school as a place in which enveloped us in a fairy tale of the life of the mind. And that was very, very powerful. When I started this, I put an ad in the New York Review of Books, and I asked anybody who was there when I was there in the 50s or 60s to get in touch with me, and out of that I got 50 depositions, and all kinds of people, and they all attested to the same thing. All kinds of people with all kinds of minds and work lives and attitudes and politics, but everybody remembered it the same way. I.S., The Life of the Mind, however their lives turned out. And I feel like it was the last of a certain kind of golden age. And I just want to see if I can. Does anything of what I wrote, what you heard me read, make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to take some questions from the audience now, and I can walk around with the microphone, I guess, if that makes sense. Sure. So let's get some hands raising, and I will come to you with the mic so that we can get you on the recording too. All right, I see one back here.
The article in The Atlantic, it's called "The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending." Anti-Semitism on the right and the left threatens to bring to a close an unprecedented period of safety and prosperity for Jewish Americans.
When was this?
How do you feel about the left wing's anti-Semitism that has taken over basically Yiddishkeit? It's, you know what I mean, right?
No, I don't really know.
Okay.
When was this article?
It's just brand new.
Yeah. Oh, all this is just a result of the Israel war, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That's all. Now, if there was a golden age for Jews as such in this country, it was over a long time ago.
How long ago?
Long ago. It was over the day that Jews started voting for Richard Nixon.
Oh, interesting.
All right?
Really?
Was that for no, what you're experiencing, we are, no doubt, I understand experience. I don't feel it, and I'm sure you don't feel it. All we do know is the uproar on the campuses, right? That's the most violently anti-Israel, and it's really anti-Israel. I don't feel it, and so I don't really, and it's not a thing I think about, so I don't really have anything to say on that score. But I don't feel it. I don't feel the country is in the grip of anti-Semitism.
That's because we're in New York.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's it. Well, I have no firsthand knowledge of the rest of the country, and I don't really have anything to say. But as far as what was meant by the Golden Age, I think was the immense rush of activity on the part of our generations of the children of those immigrant classes, of those immigrant generations, and then the immense blossoming of progressive work and progressive causes and progressives in politics. But that's been over for a long time. Jews have been so thoroughly integrated into the country for so many years now. I don't experience that kind of.
Thank you. We have another question from Paul.
Yeah, thanks so much for reading. I went to City College in the 90s, so it wasn't free, but I was able to get a master's and go to night school. So I had no idea that that's what you would be reading from, and it was amazing for me to hear about it. So I'm very excited to read that. This is kind of when you were talking about the woman who inserted, or I don't know if you said a woman, but the writer who inserted herself too much into a story that she was trying to tell about somebody else.
Right.
And that balance, that fascinated me. You very tactfully did not say what book that is. And I'm so curious what book that is, but you can't say it. Okay. But so when you say the balance, that's just something innate to, so I'm a huge fan of your work. And then the balance that you have, is that just something that you have to work out, do you think? Or obviously there might have been an editorial issue with the book that we don't know what book it is. But Is that something that you
It's
feel like you...
books. It's not just one book.
It's a bunch of... Oh, I see. It's a lot of it. Oh, okay. That makes it even more fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Why? So
I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that it was one particular...
Okay.
One.
So you think
one
it's a
particular
problem right now in a lot of books?
I would say that I see it.
Yes.
And, yeah. The problem is the problem of nonfiction writing altogether. I could go back to my own beginning years as a journalist when I was discovering personal journalism and what that meant. And in those years, there were great personal journalists like Tom Wolfe, Joan Didion, Norman Mailer. These people wrote significant work. They made significant pieces of literature using themselves, but they always knew that their usage of themselves was in service to an idea beyond themselves, to a subject beyond themselves. But in those years, you could see when there were bad personal journalists or really people who were just not talented or intelligent enough to know what they were doing, where they permitted themselves to be therapeutic on the page, confessional on the page, drawing attention to themselves without realizing that they were to be there only to serve a story beyond themselves.
Okay, that I love. That just really clarified. Thank you so much for that answer.
I mean, how
No.
that could not be, how it could not be understood, it always surprises me. So when I say that this person, this particular writer writing about a great figure, it was a biography of somebody, of a great figure, did not understand the degree to which her own inclusion in herself was inappropriate. It did not serve the larger story, and she could not remember that was why she was inserting herself. In the old days, there was a great deal of that. At the Village Voice, in particular, the Voice was a paper that its only editorial policy was to take on a writer. Once they took you on, they exercised no control at all over whoever was writing, so that people were allowed to become excruciating examples of exactly what I'm talking about now, and only if you really cared about this kind of writing did you set yourself the task of seeing where it succeeded and where it failed and why. And it always failed when the writer could not figure out the degree to which it was legitimate to include themselves in the story.
I'd be curious to know if we have, I'm going to ask you a question as I ask if there's any current MFA students in here who have a question. I'd love to hear from you. And also the fact that you said you're still grappling and working out your point of view here.
Yes.
Who gets to read your work before it's done?
Who gets to read my
who
work?
gets to? Who
I wouldn't
has
look at
to?
it that way. Every writer needs readers.
Yeah.
And I have readers.
You do have readers, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's who gets to read.
That's great. Bree has a question. Oh, no, a student next to you. Great.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm in the MFA program. My question, actually, I think it has to do with writing, but it might also have to do with life. But just, I think I relate to being like a romantic child. And I was just curious, because you kind of, I felt like you talked about it in hindsight, so I was wondering how it's changed over the years.
What exactly would you think it appropriate for me to discuss now? To answer that question.
I guess.
Tell me exactly what you have in mind when you
like,
ask
do you
a question.
still believe in it? I guess.
It?
Romance.
No.
Like the romance that you found in literature as a...
I wrote a book called The End of the Novel of Love. Did you know that? I wrote a book in which I essentially said in the title essay that you can't write a great novel anymore with love at the center. And the reason I say that is because we all have too much experience. We've all had the experience of imagining that a great love, a great passion, would be at the center of a great life, which was a 19th century notion. And when people talk about love and believing in love, when you talk about believing in love, it indicates that you subscribe to that idea that at the center of a great life is a great love, is right, that can make life great. I subscribe to the notion that that cannot be any longer a metaphor in great literature because we all have too much experience, right? Right? We marry once and it's a disaster and we say to ourselves, oh, the next time will be better. We marry the second time, it's also a disaster, and we say the next time it'll be better. The third time, we have too much experience to say that, right? So it isn't a matter of believing in love or not believing in love. Everyone loves, everyone falls in love, everyone has or doesn't have or has experience with love. It isn't something you believe in. You used to believe in it, but after all that experience, you can't believe in it anymore. Is that what you meant by wondering about my relation to love?
That was awesome. All right, we have some more questions. Two more questions. I'll do here and then over here. What can love be for an object or a vocation or instead of a person? I wonder.
Hi. I'm wondering if I can ask what your research process looks like, especially if when you're writing these nonfiction or historical novels, if there's a period of research and then gestation and then you can interact with the eye, or if you're also writing from your research as you're researching.
Oh, God. I'm a lousy researcher. Nevertheless, I have written these two books, one about Emma Goldman and one about Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and they required that I know something, about the period in which they lived and about their own, that I gain information. And I did, with a lot of pain and anxiety, spend time in a library, both occasions, doing as best I could. But the bibliography I have at the end of each of these books is pathetic. It is very, very small. Mostly, I went by the seat of my pants, just writing what I knew directly of who they were and how they acted and what they said. Now, with City College, I have a research assistant. Yeah, she's great. Yeah, she's up at City a lot. The little bit that I gave you here of historical information all comes from Natalia. I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't. I'm just flying along here. Happy for the anecdotal memories. And every time I have a conversation with somebody who did go to school with me, another anecdote forms in my head. I am really just going blind with this. But I'm a terrible researcher. I've known people who love research, and I envy them so. I envy their adoration of being in the stacks and being in the. It's a wonderful thing to see somebody in love with research.
Is anyone else really encouraged by that answer, actually? Because I am. All right, Allie has a question.
Hi, Vivian. Thank you so much for coming out to Queens tonight. So you mentioned that you have this writing practice since the pandemic, and we've heard about some works that you didn't particularly enjoy, but I'm wondering if you could share some of the nonfiction books that you've read in the last few years that you did love or enjoy.
Oh, nonfiction that I love. I read a lot of biography. And I've written in the last few years quite a number of essay reviews on literary biography. I've enjoyed that immensely. And that is what I find myself reading a great deal of. I'll tell you an interesting experience I'm in the middle of having. There's a great British biographer named Claire Tomalin. Claire Tom, you know her? She's written at least 8 great biographies of literary figures. So one day, a few weeks ago, I was it was a late afternoon. I was getting depressed, as I often do late in the afternoon. And I'm looking around thinking, I can't, there's nothing on my shelf that I want to read. I'm 1,000 books all around me. And I thought, there's nothing here I want to read. So I ran downstairs to the library, which is a few blocks away from my house. And in the library, I found myself in the memoir section. Big surprise. And there's a memoir by Claire Tomlin. And I think, oh, this will be great. She writes clear, simple sentences. I love her sentences. And I figured it can't be that demanding. She's like me. So I bring it home and I read it, and it's no good. It's no good. What I saw then was what she could do for her biographical subjects, she could not do for herself. She could not make herself an interesting character, whereas she could make as interesting as she can make her subjects. And I thought, gee, she can't do what I do. And I certainly can't do what she does. Yeah. And now I'm in the middle of her book on Thomas Hardy, and I'm enjoying it immensely.
That's great. We do have a question there's a bunch of people watching online. I'm going to read you one question from an audience member who's watching via Zoom, I think. And then after that, we might have time for one more question. So if anyone think through that. This is from Farah. She said she'd love to ask how, if at all, your relationship to your writing has evolved over your career.
I'm a lot better than I used to be.
Thank goodness. Right.
Yeah, I do think I'm a writer who has taught herself how to write. I do. When I was a kid, I was rhetoric and a mile wide. And my years at the Village Voice. Well, I'll tell you one funny thing out of the City College stuff. I discovered, among God knows how many moves, a whole thick sheaf of pieces that I wrote in English classes. My papers that I wrote, a whole bunch of them. And there are more B's and B pluses than you can shake a stick at on them. And teachers writing, this would be very good if it were not for the fancy language. So, and I look at them all, and I find myself laughing often with embarrassment, but not regret, because I got better at it. And at the Village Voice, too. For the years I spent at the Village Voice when I was on the barricades for radical feminism. And I looked upon, by the way, that effort, that time, when I felt myself on the barricades, I looked upon it as having a mission, a romantic mission. It was very romantic to me to isolate the struggle over women's rights and the whole idea. I was one of those feminists who very quickly saw women's rights as existential. I saw it as emblematic of a human condition divided against itself. You hear the rhetoric in my voice? That was on the page all the time. So I had a lot of learning to do. The one good thing was that I knew it had to get better.
Thanks so much for coming out, Vivian, tonight. I really enjoyed the reading. And I just wanted to ask you, I guess, more about life advice. If you're a writer who you're looking for, I don't know, I guess I'm going to be graduating soon, and you've been speaking a lot about the Village Voice. What types of career advice or personal advice do you have for somebody who wants to write, but they also have to, make money and live in New York?
Oh, the two are unrelated.
Okay, just get a job. Don't get a job in the field.
No. Oh, well, no. I mean, if you can, wonderful. Mostly people don't make a living at writing for a very long time, if ever. Mostly they teach, get to teach. And my stumbling into the Village Voice position, that was years, I was in my 30s when that happened. I did everything that everybody else does. I mean, I was a waitress, I was this, I was that. there's no relation between making a living and writing. If and when you do, there's no.
If I could ask one more thing, what piece of life advice would you give to writers?
Listen to this. Right.
I hope you came prepared, right, to write. Absolutely check out, I think it's in Approaching Eye Level. You have a wonderful essay about your time doing catering work, actually, or waitressing work.
Working in Catskills, yeah.
Catskills. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Thank you, Vivian.
Huge thanks to Vivian and Catherine. I also just want to observe that it really feels fantastic to feel the spirit of community in the room and to be here together after years where that was interrupted. So thank you for coming out.